Working space for entrepreneurs. It's where people can bring their entrepreneurial ideas together and get them off the ground. They also run a lot of networking events. So I'm just going to make this one. Thank you to Sadil, who is our breakfast and coffee sponsor. They're originally from Singapore, but they now have shops here in Hong Kong, in Shenyang, in the Infinitus Plaza, as well as in West 9 Zone and also in the Elements building. Cranberry is our videographer this morning, and they've been helping us out for months now, so a huge thank you to Cranberry. We'd also like to thank James Wendlinger, who is our photographer. And of course to our volunteers. There's so many people that have helped us out, so if you wouldn't mind just raising your hands to all of our incredible volunteers. Thank you so much for all of your work. If you want to Twitter or tweet, tweet, not Twitter. #CreativeMornings. That's the global one, and then CMHK is the local tag. And now for Ellie and Cruz. Not only did Ellie and Cruz run a very successful creative content and copywriting business called the Quick Word Company, and they also don't kill each other as siblings who work together. But they also do TV presenting, radio hosting. They run No Lights, No Lycra here in Hong Kong, and in their spare time they also run poetry reading evenings. So without further ado, a huge thank you and welcome to Ellie and Cruz.
Good morning everyone, thank you for coming along to our little talk on humility. Or as we've been referring to it as, a totally unfair, really tough, mind-splittingly challenging discussion topic, which automatically sets up its speakers, us, to appear as the furthest thing from humble. So with this topic, we started to look at definitions of humility. Oh, sorry, before we begin, if you are tweeting in today's session, we suggest you use the following hashtags: #humble, #blessed, #grateful, and #thankful.
And of course, these are best used in succession on Instagram.
So we started by looking at some definitions of humility. And humility is the quality of having a modest or low view of one's importance, modest opinion or estimate of one's own importance, rank, etc., the state or quality of being humble, or as C.S. Lewis quite eloquently put it, humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less.
Now this is an interesting one for us. We really struggled with this topic, hands up. It's a tough one. And I think it's because in Hong Kong, it's very hard to be humble. We're in a city that's driven by business and by money and by enterprise, and it's a competitive city. And that makes sense. Even for us creatives, it is competitive. That's most of our business in this room. So I think sometimes that's something that we were kind of thinking about. We're like, where is this junction between creativity and humility? And everyone we know, creative, when we said we were doing a Creative Mornings talk on humility, laughed at us.
So we looked at social media and how I think that's at a war against humility, because social media is about constructing your own personal brand. Every cup of tea, every holiday you put on social media, every thought, it's the furthest thing, I think, from being humble. But quite lovely, there's Charles Brooks.
David Brooks.
My mistake.
Okay, so David Brooks is a writer for the New York Times, and when we were thinking about this, we're like, we live in a culture of me, right? That's what that's probably why everyone's laughing, because everything beyond your personal life is being shared and packaged into some sort of thing that other people have to witness. And David Brooks said this well in the New York Times. He said, we live in the culture of the big me. The meritocracy wants you to promote yourself. Social media wants you to broadcast a highlight reel of your life. Your parents and teachers were always telling you how wonderful you were, because we all know everyone very special. But all the people I've ever deeply admired are profoundly honest about their own weaknesses. They have identified their core sin, whether it is selfishness, the desperate need for approval, cowardice, hard-heartedness, or whatever. They have traced how that core sin leads to the behaviour that makes them feel ashamed. They have achieved a profound humility, which has been defined as an intense self-awareness from a position of other-centeredness. And thank you for bearing with me, because that's a bit long. But that's what we like, this idea of a core sin. It's our inherent failures and weaknesses that we're not really acknowledging. And we thought about this, and when we were looking up humility, of course, a lot of the references were people with religious or spiritual beliefs, and it makes sense. Humility is something that's very strived for with religions of the world, because it's the ultimate act of humility, attributing everything to something bigger than yourself. It's not about you. And there's a beautiful quote from Mother Teresa: if you are humble, nothing will touch you, neither praise nor disgrace, because you know what you are. But the thing is, we were looking at this, and it's kind of ironic that today there's a million of these. A picture of her with the quote. I think Mother Teresa and Gandhi and all these other wonderful philosophical figures and leaders were kind of trying to be the thing, rather than tell everyone they were the good thing. And that's something we came across as well. So, we decided that this was getting very complicated, looking into these definitions, and a bit heavy, so we took to the stock photos of the universe. And this is what we found. There was a lot of pictures of plants, a lot of these kind of things, placards with hands, very powerful stuff. This, personal favourite, I think this looks like a new hipster beauty concept store. Whatever that is. And this sort of confused-looking chocolate Labrador, and basically everyone's Instagram photos from Phuket over the Easter holidays in Hong Kong. And this child came up quite high in the listings for humility. I also like to point out that this picture's from Getty. That's not a cheap image. There's some more humility photos. Interpret them as you will. Hope some of these are speaking to you.
Sexy gal girl and country bumpkin.
Yeah. Fingers in submission, not sure what that one is either. Tracy M in bed. There was a lot of praying, actually, but and there was a lot of crown of thorns, which makes sense. There's a lot of religious references. Heath lone, heath walking, ball and chains, I don't know. Pomegranates, the most humble of the fruit. And here in succession we have puppet man, hooded man, and horse.
So
hands up. Yeah, hands up. We really struggled with what humility meant, but according to this, so did everybody else.
So we looked closer to home, and Cruzanne and I looked to see what keeps us humble, and we're sisters.
If you didn't know that, we have the same name, we're wearing the same pants.
We work together, we socialise together, we spend most of every day, all day together. So how do we keep each other humble? I think with siblings, those of you with a brother or sister, you know that you can't inflate his ego.
Well, you could, but you just choose not to.
No matter how confident, savvy, smart, how good you're doing at work, you know, your siblings always know. And it will remind you of times,
basically, that this happened. Humbling, isn't it?
For all good use.
Exactly.
And there's a lot of material where that came from. I've actually had moments where I've walked into a room and I've had a really good day, and I did this, I did this, I did this. She goes, Cruz, look at this photo. I'm like, all right, yes, I will not forget where I came from.
So apart from being sisters, what else keeps you humble? I think it's that idea of caring for something that can't care for itself. Now, Cruzanne and I, we don't have children yet, but we do have dogs.
And for those of you who do have children, we do realise that is nothing like having a dog. Just to clarify.
So we started this campaign from this Hong Kong photographer called Give Love a Chance, which was aimed at promoting rescue dogs. And both Cruzanne and I dogs, my Noodle here, pictured on the left, was found walking the mean streets of Yamate. And Cruzanne's dog Alfie down there.
My dog Alfie was from, they're both in the SPCA, was found like this. in a breeding operation in the New Territories. Side note, adopt, don't buy. So she was pumping out puppies for pet shops in Hong Kong for years and years of her life from this cage. And we love these animals, but both of our dogs are kind of misfit dogs. And it does keep you humble because they're really old, they're really smelly, and both of them have a tendency to eat their own poo if you don't watch them.
So it was ironic that we started this campaign called Give Love a Chance, because we struggle to love our dogs sometimes.
Yeah, a lot of the time. Because frankly, a dog is a dog, and you can't rebrand a dog. Heaven knows we've tried. But there's something about an animal or caring for something that can't care for itself that really does keep you humble and keeps you patient, because they don't care that you're super successful or that you've had a nice day or that you feel really fancy. If you don't show up, they're going to pee on the carpet. And the other thing about having a dog is that, as anyone who has a dog, they wouldn't, it's not if, but when they lead to an incredibly embarrassing situation for you. That just happens. And this is what led us to think about being self-conscious, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as mentioned by Gemma, Cruzanne and I chose No Lights, No Lycra here in Hong Kong. So I brought out No Lights, No Lycra from, it started in Melbourne, and it's a global dance movement where we dance in the dark for an hour in an underground basement. And so no lights, and no lycra means you don't have to wear dance clothes, you don't have to be a professional dancer to join in. It's fun, it's an inclusive environment, it's non-judgmental.
It's really fun. It's how we get in touch with our big fat inner hippie. In fact, we've been doing this for so long now that we're veterans, and occasionally we branch out and dance in the shard of light from the exit sign. But it's amazing. No Lights, No Lycra, and so many different people come along, and it's really humbling because it's incredible what you're capable of when you don't think somebody can witness you. Because I'm an incredible dancer. I do things I wouldn't imagine doing in the daytime. And that's what No Lights, No Lycra's brought us. These people come there, and they're from all walks of life, and half the time you don't even speak to people, and you know they've had a long day, and they've got their own stresses. But the lights go off, and everyone dances like a mad thing, and you do not judge a single person.
And you can't impress anyone because no one can see you. Good luck with that. But it's about being vulnerable.
And that's the thing, when we have new experiences, we open ourselves up to being vulnerable, and that's a big sense of humility as well. And we feel vulnerable because we have egos, and I think that's what we perceive ourselves to be, that we're constantly crafting this image of ourselves that we've got to put out all the time. And when we step away from that, and we go into a basement and we dance in the dark, it makes us feel vulnerable. But I think actually, to be fair, we're kind of hard on each other, especially in the creative sector, between ego and self-confidence.
So as John Lennon said, if being an egomaniac means I believe in what I do and in my art or music, then in that respect you can call me that. I believe in what I do and I'll say it.
Now, he was probably my least favourite Beatle, but I think he does have quite a solid point here. And I think we're quite unforgiving of each other when it comes to putting out there that we feel good about what we do. This is another quote from Hamza Yusuf. He's a very interesting chap. I recommend you look him up. He's an American Islamic scholar. Read the quote.
Yes, the weak are dominated by their ego, the wise dominate their ego, and the intelligent are in a constant struggle against their ego.
And I think that's what maybe is some of the most relevant thing about humility for us as creatives, is that struggle. Because we do have to go out there and we do have to sell our ideas to people. There's only so much value in being a closeted wallflower genius when you make your living from promoting what you do. So we really thought about this as well, and we thought, well, then how can you find that struggle as someone that has to constantly say, this is what I do, I'm great, don't you want to work with me, this is going to be a good thing? How do you find that balance? And we realised that it's storytelling. Before the storytelling, this is a poem that we really like by Charles Bukowski. Go ahead.
Sometimes when everything seems at its worst, when all conspires and gnaws, and the hours, days, weeks, years seem wasted, stretched there upon my bed in the dark, looking upward at the ceiling, I get what many will consider an obnoxious thought. It's still nice to be Bukowski.
And we love this poem because it is. It's about that struggle, and it's about that acknowledging of your core sin, of which Bukowski had many. So storytelling, and it's because storytelling is most interesting when it's honest, hey?
Yeah, and you make yourself vulnerable when you tell stories. You open yourself up, and there's something incredibly humble about people who tell stories. You get to know more about them.
And the most interesting stories are about failures. You'll find this with any good autobiography you've ever read. It's not about, so what happened is I woke up, I fell out of bed, and I was a millionaire. That's not it. I remember reading an autobiography where someone said they deleted the last 3 chapters because they were about their success, and it made the book really boring. It was a boring note to end on. Stories are about our failures and our ability to laugh at ourselves and realize our faults. And I think that's a really humbling thing. For example, storytelling was how I got into stand-up comedy. And I chose this picture originally to humble myself because it is the most cringy depiction of me from the 5 years I was a stand-up comedian. I thought I would bring myself as me straddling a suitcase. But that's okay, I accept that about myself. And telling stories was what got me into stand-up because I was able to laugh at myself. And I enjoyed laughing at myself. And I enjoyed putting myself down to the fact that everyone was equal and everyone has flaws. And that's what I really enjoyed.
Both Cruzanne and I are performance poets. And again, we enjoy the idea of storytelling, of engaging with an audience. When you perform, you're at the mercy of your audience, like we are right now.
Yeah.
So and you're vulnerable. So it keeps us humble. And it's this idea of when you're open to new experiences, then you have the great stories.
Yeah, actually.
Open to new experiences. This was my first and only attempt at modelling. It didn't last long, but it gave me some great stories.
And I would buy that jacket.
So with all that, what does humility mean to us today? I think humility is honesty. It's exposing the vulnerability. It's being able to laugh at yourself. It's open-mindedness. It's new experiences. It's having good manners. There's no excuse for bad manners.
Yeah, actually, we really mean that, actually. We thought about this a lot, and we're like, being polite is one of the most powerful things you can be, to be humble. Because if you treat someone else with a decent courtesy of saying good morning, or holding open a door, or just speaking to people with a tone of voice that doesn't direct all your baggage onto them, it's a really, really difficult thing to do, and it's a pretty humbling experience.
Respecting each other, not interpreting self-confidence for egomania,
Which is very difficult in the creative sector.
and finding your own outlet as a big fat hippie.
But that's a lot to kind of keep in mind, to be honest. We came from this, and as we said, we struggled with humility. And this is what we did when we kind of looked at our life. And then we sort of sat back and we got really honest with ourselves. And we thought, honestly, what is it that me and Ellie do on an almost daily basis that keeps us really humble? And we think about space. We think about space a lot. It's something that we're fascinated by. Whenever anything seems too much, we put it all in perspective. And here's an image. I don't know if you're familiar with this image. This is the Hubble Deep Field image. Since then, there's also been Hubble Extreme Deep Field, but I'm not going to talk about that one. This image came from the fact that they saw a section of sky with nothing in it. It was a tiny black dot. They couldn't see anything in there from Earth. So they got the Hubble telescope, and at the cost of millions and millions of dollars, they directed it at the black section of sky for 10 days. And after 10 days, this is what came back. This isn't even the full image. I had to crop some for the presentation. There are over 10,000 galaxies in this image. Each galaxy contains billions and billions of stars. I mean, that may be hard to put into perspective for you. I could tell you a different way. Fun fact, I'm a Trekkie. That's not the fun fact. The fun fact is that all of the Star Trek series took place in the same galaxy, in the Milky Way, including Voyager. Anyone getting my references? Including Voyager. That all took place in the same galaxy. There were more than 10,000 in one square of space where we couldn't see anything. Another fun fact, if you shrank our sun to the size of a white blood cell, and using the same scale that shrunk the Milky Way, it would be the size of North America.
That's humbling.
That's humbling, yeah. So speaking of Voyager, in 1977, Voyager 1 left our system for the fringes of our solar system. Left Earth for the fringes of our solar system. And in 1990, it was really on the way out. It had traveled 6.4 billion miles, and the engineers turned it around to take a photo of Earth. And this is that photo, which might not seem like much here. It's referred to as the pale blue dot. And I think if we're talking about humility,
If we want you to go over anything today,
yeah,
we're going to end on
from the words of Carl Sagan, who wrote about this, because this is the most humbling thing me and Ellie think about every day. Look again at that dot. That's here, that's home, that's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you have ever heard of, every human being who ever was lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there, on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. The earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors in glory and triumph, that they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Think endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner on this pixel to the scarcely indistinguishable inhabitants of the other corner of the pixel, how frequent their misunderstandings, how eager they are to kill one another, how fervent their hatreds. Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe, are challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. The Earth is the only world we have known so far to harbour life. There is nowhere else, at least in the near future, to which our species could migrate. Visit? Yes, exciting. Settle? Not yet. Like it or not, for the moment the Earth is where we make our stand. It has been said that astronomy is a humbling and character-building experience. There is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image of our tiny world. To me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known. We can't top that, so thank you very much for coming out this morning. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ladies. That's quite a deep topic for a Friday morning.
We know.
Sorry and thank you. It's obviously a really broad topic as well, and so rather than our normal sort of Q&As of just directing questions to Ellie and Cruz, I thought maybe we could just kind of open up a general discussion. We've got about 10-15 minutes, so is there anyone that sort of has any thoughts about this particular topic or things that we want to share? I know the girls have touched on a lot. Yes.
Yes, something you said earlier that's been going through my mind and bothers me is the idea that humility is driven by a sense of shame. I'm not sure that that's true, and I'm just wondering what people think about that. I mean, it seems to me it's possible to be humble and still have a healthy sense of self. So what do people think about that?
I'll answer. I think it's a good question, and we came across the same thing, and we struggled with the complete, I don't know, we spoke, is it an oxymoron? Is it hypocrisy for us to be talking about humility? For us to stand in front of a room of people and say, hello, we know about something, and then at the same time we're like, but we've worked very hard in our lives you work hard to be self-confident at what you do and to feel like you deserve to be here. But where does the line go? So I completely agree with you. We had a hard time with that one.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, to be humble sometimes can be a virtue. And I think in the way that sometimes people wear arrogance as a shield, as a defense mechanism, because actually they're insecure, so they kind of express arrogance. I think that being humble sometimes puts you in a position of strength, that you're actually allowing someone else to actually sort of take the stage or whatever. But I definitely think that it's people who are confident that have the confidence to be humble. And sometimes, like for example, in the line of work, you mentioned about presenting to clients and so on. It's sometimes the boss, the big person, who's the most humble. It's the ones in between and lower who feel the need to express their kind of, I know what I'm talking about, And you see that comes from a position of strength and confidence.
You see sometimes people hiding behind you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that about humility, I often think about being a good listener, which wasn't mentioned, but when I'm at a party or at a function like this, there's a tendency sometimes to talk about what we're doing, and it's really important to listen to people, and you can tell sometimes in a conversation somebody's not very humble because no matter what you're talking about, it always comes back to something of their own experience, and they go on and on. You mention something, and if you ask questions and if you are a good listener and you try to learn more about what they're doing, I think that is a kind of sign of humility too.
I wonder if anyone has any thoughts on cultural differences in humility, and especially in Hong Kong, you have both the East culture and the Western culture. And a lot of times, these two cultures have very different impression or a different definition of what humility is. For example, when I was in Japan, me and my parents, we went out with to a dinner with some business partners. And then my mom started talking about, started praising me and my brother. And the Japanese partners thought it was very weird that parents would be doing that in front of business partners, but also in front of friends as well. But in America, where I received a part of my education, and also where I would identify myself as, it's quite common for people to praise their children and to not see it as something that should be hidden or it should be something that's shared. But of course, in Asian cultures, it might be perceived differently. So I wonder if anyone has just thoughts on cultural differences in regards to humility.
Sorry.
Go, Chris.
I'm sorry about this. How do you feel? It's an interesting point because I think I've seen creative people come here and be themselves and completely fall flat on their face because they don't understand the concept of the face. And when you come here, you have to get your head around that and understand about being humble and giving face. And sometimes you just to be yourself and say, well, I think this, or I think that's a piece of shit. Doesn't necessarily work. It comes across as arrogant. So you come across as arrogant even if you're not. And that's something I think to work within the industry, culturally here. People coming from outside need to understand and work with that and make it work for them.
We've got more time. Does anyone else have any other thoughts?
I'm in human resources for global recruiting, especially for creative people. To resonate your questions, I meet with candidates all over the world, Skyping or in person. Meeting people all over the world having different definitions of how to coach themselves, how to pitch a job. And as a human resources person, always looking at particular prospects. So a balance between, quote, humility under control, and at the same time be able to showcase who you are. As a human resources person, I do very often do active listening, but not all human resources persons are like that. Please do understand this. We are not very humble creatures. At the same time, it is very important to understand the aspects of being adjusting yourself to that particular culture, even also to your listener or whoever you're dealing with. It is always a factor that we're looking for, particularly when we talk about global citizens, when we talk about working with people all over the world, having different definitions about what is pitching, what is listening, what is who you are, showcasing who you are. So I think both of you did an excellent job, sharing with us, what is humility. I can't, thank you more.
So you all have a lot of really lovely quotes, and one that, I'm 26, so take this with a grain of salt, but I feel like humility is something that really strengthens with age. And for me, I was reading the Poisonwood Bible when I was in college, and there's a line where one of the characters talks about how
her father never learned anything, but I pretended to know everything. And it was one of those moments where I had to like put the book down, and I was like, oh my God, I think I might be an idiot. And I realized that, you know, like active listening, if you just really take time to open yourself up, and instead of pretending that you like, you know everything, if you just allow yourself to be humble, you can open yourself up to a lot more knowledge in the long run.
I can share. I've had a similar moment. I'm 30, so I'm not much older than you. But Brene Brown, I don't know if any of you have seen her talk. She talks about vulnerability and how the only way to be happy is to be truly vulnerable. And she was much older when she came to this realization. She talks about how she had this breakdown moment, and she was like, she's amazing. I totally recommend watching her on TED. But she's a really confident woman, and she was like, hang on a second, I've got to break all this down and open myself up to everybody, and that's the only way to be humble or to be happy. And she just couldn't handle it. She took like years in going to see a psychiatrist and trying to work through all this. But so yeah, that was the moment for me, whereas the only way to be happy was to be vulnerable, which was quite interesting.
Just to touch on a comment from before about being humble and being yourself and being vulnerable. I've found that moving to Hong Kong, you want to put your best foot forward, and you are vulnerable, but you also, I found that you've got to inflate your own ego to an extent, so that you do put your best foot forward. And it's always about the me thing, and from a personal point of view, I find it very difficult to do that, but I find that if you want people to know about what you do, you've got to sing the me song, and especially from the recruiting side of things, you've got to put your best foot forward, and sometimes it can be very difficult to put yourself, to be humble, and yet put your best foot forward, because you've only ever got one shot at it.
Sure, I'll just say one thing. I think what resonated with me very much is about being polite. That's one thing. I'm a recent transplant here in Hong Kong, so it's only been 4 months. But I'm finding that being polite, even if you're just in the subway, it's something that's really important to be able to understand another person, and just to get one smile in the day from someone that you don't know. It's really humbling.
I think it's a really interesting point actually, like you say, you have to get your best foot forward because you have to get in there. We're in a creative business, it's how we pay our rent. It's, you know what I mean, we love what we do, but you need to somehow bring something home from that. But what we've found actually is really humbling is that it's me to get your foot in the door, and then it's exactly what Brian mentioned, it's sitting back and listening. And that's something we find really humbling because we get our foot in the door, we win a new client, and then the nature of our work is that we then have to sit and listen to them in order to capture their voice. And we've had instances of like whole days where we've interviewed entire teams of people, and we've come away just being like, those people, like, not to sort of, I know this sounds a bit affected, but those people haven't had the opportunity to speak that way about themselves, and we've been able to just be here to listen to them.
And then, as someone else said, like when you get older, you start to get humble again.
Yeah.
And it's almost, and the same works professionally. It's like where, you know, you start off, you genuinely don't know everything, and then you have to try and put this best foot forward, and you know, put yourself out there to get it. But then once you get the self-confidence that you know what you're doing, or you're happy with who you are, then the humility can kind of come back again. So, you know, we have this, or do we have this kind of hump where you have humility on either side, and a kind of bit in the middle where you have to fight through it. Yeah. I don't know. That was just me.
Please take a cupcake or a muffin or a whole cake in the morning and afternoon tea. There was so much food left over. Thank you to Sajel again. And if you wouldn't mind just registering on the way out, that would be great. We'll see you at our next event, which is on May 16th, 15th, or Friday. And the theme is robot, so we look forward to seeing you then. Thanks, everyone.